All right, so today we're diving into something pretty unusual, I think. We were here once. This book that sort of imagines a future where humans just decide, we're done having kids, like no more. It's kind of a wild thought, right? What happens to the world, to, society?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It really makes you think about all those things we kind of take for granted, like families and the energy of kids and how that shapes our world. The sounds of kids playing.
Exactly, yeah. And it's not like, some dystopian like Children of Men kind of scenario where, people are forced into it. It's about choice. People are choosing to stop having kids.
Right, right. It's like what happens when humanity decides, kind of collectively, to hit the pause button on the next generation.
Yeah, and the story kind of revolves around the scientist, Dr. Evelyn Voss is her name, and she's the one who comes up with this thing called Nutrix. It's a reversible nanotech contraceptive. So like on the surface, it's this solution to all these, growing environmental concerns and population pressures, but it becomes something much, much bigger than that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It kind of raises all these questions about the long-term consequences of that kind of choice, right?
Yeah.
And also what happens to us as a species, as individuals, when we're no longer focused on raising the next generation.
That's a great point. And before we kind of jump into the whole like societal impact and all that, I'm kind of curious about the science behind this whole Nutrix thing. Like how plausible is this nanotech contraceptive thing?
Well, the book doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of like, the actual like, molecules and how it works, but the idea of targeted nanotechnology, that can interact with the reproductive system, it's not totally out there. I mean, we're already seeing some, pretty amazing advancements in nanomedicine for other stuff.
So it's not completely sci-fi, like, something out of Star Trek, right? It's grounded in some possibility at
Yeah,
least.
yeah, it's definitely within the realm of, what we could potentially achieve.
Okay, so let's say this Nutrix thing is real. It's out there. It's being marketed as this choice, right? A way to take control of your future and contribute to a more sustainable planet. Would you personally consider taking it?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It really is. It's like you said, it's presented as a choice. And the book, I think, does a really good job of laying out like all the complexities of that choice. So yeah, there's the potential benefits like, reducing our impact on the environment, you know, less strain on resources. But then there's that other side of the coin, right? The emotional side. Like what does it do to us as humans when we take away that possibility of having children, that connection to the future? What does that even mean? It's just a lot to unpack.
Totally, yeah. It's like, you think you're making this rational decision based on, logic and all that, but then there's all this other stuff that, comes into play.
Exactly. And that's where those unintended consequences come in, right? Like
Yeah.
you make a choice thinking it's going to lead to A, but, you might end up with Z. You just never know.
And it seems like that's a big theme in the book, right? Like the author's not saying Nutrix is good or bad. It's more about, like you said, exploring those ripple effects. So,
Yeah.
like how does society even begin to grapple with this shift towards a childless world? Like how does that even play out?
Well, it's interesting. It starts very gradually. It's not like this sudden overnight change. Like birth rates just start to kind of slowly decline, like a quiet acceptance of this new normal.
It's like a slow fade.
Yeah, exactly. And at first, there's this sense of relief almost, like, oh, okay, the cities aren't as crowded. It's quieter, more peaceful, less traffic jams and all that. But then that peace starts to turn into something else, something a little bit more unsettling.
And what's really interesting to me is the role of marketing in all this. Like the book even mentions Bill Gates, like Bill as advocating for Nutrix as this responsible lifestyle choice.
Right.
Like how much of the decision to take Nutrix is driven by, people actually believing in it versus just kind of like social pressure.
It's a good question, and I think it's probably a bit of both, right? Like the book doesn't present it as a mandate, right?
Yeah.
It's always a choice, but it definitely plays on this desire to be seen as a good citizen, as someone who's doing their part for the planet, and having someone like Bill Gates putting his weight behind it, it definitely gives it a certain legitimacy and and cachet, right? It's almost like it becomes like the trendy thing to do.
Yeah. It's almost like a status symbol in a way.
Right, right. Like, oh, I'm so responsible. I'm not having children, I'm saving the planet.
Yeah, yeah. It's really fascinating how they kind of flip the script on the whole population control thing. It's not some, big brother government imposing limits. It's individuals choosing, to opt out for what they see as the greater good.
And that's where the ethics of it all get really tricky.
Yeah.
Because, even though it's presented as a choice, the book kind of hints at the fact that Nutrix might be subtly influencing people's desires.
Yeah.
It's not just about preventing pregnancy. It's about like diminishing that yearning for parenthood.
Oh, wow. That's pretty creepy when you think about it that way. It's like, at what point does choice become like something else entirely?
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what are the limits of free will?
Yeah.
How much control do we really have over our own desires and choices?
And the book kind of goes there, right? It makes you think about that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely challenges you to think about those deeper questions.
So we've got this subtle shift happening, right? Driven by all these different factors, environmental concerns, social pressure, maybe even a little bit of manipulation going on. So what happens next? Like, paint us a picture of this childless world starting to take shape.
Well, the first thing you notice is this sense of calm, like an almost eerie kind of quiet. There are these really beautiful descriptions in the book, like empty playgrounds, bathed in this afternoon sun,
Yeah.
and schools that have been turned into community centers for the elderly. It's a world where silence has really become the dominant sound.
I can almost picture it. And it's kind of both, intriguing and a little bit like unsettling at the same time.
Yeah. It's definitely a world of contradictions.
Yeah.
Like there's peace, but there's also this underlying unease. Like people are starting to feel the absence of children, not just, physically, but emotionally. Like the whole rhythm of life is changing. The energy, the vibrancy that kids bring to the world, it's starting to fade.
And that's when those real consequences start to, become apparent, right? Not just the physical changes to the environment, but those deeper psychological and societal shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the whole fabric of society starts to unravel a bit.
Yeah. Like you see institutions like the Vatican, really struggling to adapt their doctrines to a world where there are no more generations coming up. And, the book even introduces this concept of temporal dysphoria, like this sense of unease, this disconnect from the future that people start to experience.
Temporal dysphoria, that's a new one. Can you break that down a little bit more? Like, what exactly is that, and how does it show up in the book?
Yeah, so it's almost like this collective existential anxiety, like this feeling of rootlessness, of not being connected to the flow of time.
Yeah.
And because there are no children, no tangible link to the future, people just start to question their place in the world.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of it all if there's no one to come after us?
That's a pretty heavy thought. I mean, how do people even cope with that kind of feeling?
They try to adapt.
Yeah.
They look for new ways to find meaning and connection in this world that feels increasingly static, like art and music. They become much more introspective, more melancholic,
Right.
reflecting that sense of loss and longing. And a lot of people turn to technology, to
Okay.
virtual realities, trying to kind of fill that void that's left by the absence of children.
It's almost like they're trying to recreate that energy, that vibrancy that kids naturally bring to the world. Like it's almost like a collective grieving process in a way.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way to put it. It's like they're grieving for a future that never had a chance to be.
Wow. So we've got this shrinking population, this really profound psychological impact, a society that's just, trying to figure out how to function in this new reality. What about the more practical consequences, like the actual like nuts and bolts of how things work? How does the book address the economic and social structures of a childless world?
Well, I mean, just imagine trying to make economic models work when you don't have a growing workforce, right? Or trying to sustain, Social Security systems that were designed for a generational handover.
Right.
Just it doesn't work. And you see these systems starting to buckle under the strain. Governments are scrambling, trying to find solutions, but it's like they're dealing with a problem that's never existed before.
So it's kind of like a slow motion train wreck. Like you can see it coming, but there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Yeah, it's a pretty bleak picture in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if the whole thing is really just a cautionary tale about the illusion of control.
I think there's definitely an element of that in there. The book really highlights the fact that, even with the best intentions, our attempts to control the future can have, really unexpected and sometimes disastrous consequences. We might think we're being rational, making these calculated choices, but we can never really fully grasp the ripple effects,
And in this case, those ripple effects are pretty huge. I mean, we've talked about the societal impact, the psychological stuff, but what about the individuals, the people who actually lived through this transition, who experienced both the world with children and then the world without?
Yeah, the book really gets interesting when it focuses on that last generation.
Yeah.
The ones who were born before Nutrix became widespread.
Yeah.
They're kind of stuck in this weird in-between space.
Yeah.
They had these memories of childhood, of family life, but, they're also living in a world that's rapidly moving on without them. It's a really poignant portrayal.
I bet. They must feel such a profound sense of loss, like witnessing the end of an era. Does the book talk about how they deal with that?
Yeah, it does. And one of the things that keeps coming up is this phrase, "We were here once." The last generation just keeps repeating that, almost like a mantra,
Yeah.
like a way of holding on to their humanity, of reminding themselves that their lives had meaning, even in a world that seems to be forgetting them.
It's almost like a message in a bottle, right? Just like tossing it out there, hoping that someone will find it someday.
Exactly. And it really speaks to that human need to leave a legacy, to feel like our lives mattered. Even in the face of, extinction, there's still this urge to connect, to be remembered.
It's a powerful image. So what do they do? Like, how do they try to leave their mark on this world that's kind of moving on without them?
They do what they can. Some of them dedicate themselves to preserving memories, like archiving stories and music and laughter, creating these digital time capsules in the hopes that, maybe someday someone will stumble upon them. It's like a way of saying, hey, we may be gone, but this is who we were. This is what we loved. This is what we lost.
It's both beautiful and kind of heartbreaking at the same time. It really makes you think about how we often take the simple joys of childhood for granted. The laughter, the energy, the sense of wonder.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the book, those things become like these precious artifacts of a bygone era.
It really makes you appreciate, the irreplaceable role that children play in our lives and in the world.
There's also this one image in the book that I keep coming back to. It's this really poetic image of the last generation planting seeds, not for future generations, but for the earth itself, like as if they're trying to give back to a planet that they might have inadvertently silenced.
Oh, wow. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
It's a symbol of hope and reconciliation.
Yeah.
Like even in the face of loss, there's still that enduring connection to the natural world, that desire to nurture and sustain life.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from the science of nanotechnology to the psychology of silence and the poignant efforts of that last generation to leave their mark. But there's one more thing I want to talk about. And this is where things get a little bit, well, cosmic.
Oh, you're talking about the ending.
Yeah.
How the book leaves us with this image of the earth is continuing on,
Yeah.
like indifferent to humanity's absence, but still carrying this faint echo of their existence.
Exactly. That line, "We were here once." It's chilling and beautiful and thought-provoking all at the same time. But what does it mean? Like, what's the author trying to tell us with that final whisper?
Yeah, it really does. It
Yeah.
really makes you think about legacy, doesn't it? Like, it's not just about the things we build or accomplish, but the very fact that we existed at all.
Right. Like, even if there's no one around to remember us, that whisper, "We were here once," it's still out there, echoing through time.
It's like a cosmic message in a bottle. Maybe someone will find it someday. Maybe not. But that doesn't diminish the importance of the message itself.
So maybe it's not even about some future civilization digging up those digital archives and piecing together our story. Maybe it's just about the imprint we leave on the universe, like the fact that we were here, that we lived, that we loved, that we experienced this incredible thing called life.
Yeah, I think that's a really profound way to think about it. Like, we're all part of this much bigger story, right?
Yeah.
This cosmic narrative that stretches far beyond our individual lifetimes. And even though, our time on this planet is finite, the energy that we put out into the world, the choices we make, the connections we forge, it all leaves a mark, like ripples spreading out from a pebble dropped in a pond.
Okay, now you're giving me chills. So it's like, even if humanity writes itself out of the story, the story itself keeps going, and we were a part of it. Like, that's both terrifying and kind of amazing at the same time.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that brings us back to what this book and this whole deep dive are really all about. It's not just about, exploring this hypothetical scenario of a childless future. It's really a reflection on the choices that we're making right now and the legacy that we're leaving behind.
Yeah, totally. Like, it forces us to confront some pretty big questions. Like, what does it mean to live a meaningful life? What responsibilities do we have to the planet, to future generations, even if those future generations don't exist?
And how do we balance our desire for control with the acceptance that some things are just beyond our grasp?
This deep dive it's been quite a journey. We've gone from, nanotechnology to the psychology of silence, all the way to the cosmic implications of human existence. And it's been mind-blowing, to say the least.
It's been a privilege to explore these ideas with you.
And I'm really grateful for your insights.
Well, thank you.
So for our listeners, if you're feeling even a little bit of the awe and the wonder and maybe even the existential dread that we're feeling right now, I highly recommend checking out We Were Here Once. It's a book that will stay with you, I guarantee it.
It's a journey you won't soon forget.
So until next time, keep diving deep, keep asking the big questions, and most importantly, keep embracing the wonder and the complexity of this incredible, incredible journey that we call life.
Rage. Rage against the dying of the light. In the stillness of the night we find our way, guided by the moon's gentle